So you want to improve your Gdscript codes on Godot? Alright, let me show you a few things you can do. First, let's talk about the organization of your code. Yes, it is very important to organize your code in a very specific way. For instance, we know that constants should be on top of your script rather than below your variables or functions. So here is one of the things I usually do with code organization. Don't worry about what they mean yet if you don't know, because I'm going to explain later in the video. For now, let's just worry about the organization aspect. So the first ones are the enumeration values. Then the second type of information that I usually place on my script are the constants. Then next goes the export variables. Then next the public vars, which I'm going to explain later. Then the private variables. Then I place my unread variables. Then I place the built-in override methods. Then I place my public methods. And finally my private methods. Now, depending on the way you do this, you want to have a different order, but most likely you can use this for every single script you make in the game. So by keeping your code organized in a structure like this will help you maintain clean code, because everything is separated on their own categories. Because if you do not do this, your code will get very messy by mixing the type order. So let me show you, for example, if I rearrange this type of code here just in another group system, like try to separate it by categories of abstract things, you can see how this can get very ugly real fast. And I don't see any benefits from doing it like this. So I try to group IDs on the same place, anything related to speed, values and values together here. And you can see how this is not readable by any chance. And of course, you can also keep the order as we did previously by trying to make sure that everything is set correctly. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is a great way for you to work it. I think if you do the code on this way, with having a clear structure here where you place everything, it becomes second nature for you to understand the code, which is a lot more simple. If you do it this way, you're placing in basically structure on abstract things that are related to your code is going to get very difficult very quickly. So I don't recommend you to organize your code like this. But let's just say that you don't want to keep the code this way, you want to have these things, but you do not want, for every time you want to create a new script file, you would want to have to type all that again. So you would have to type here, okay, the first one are enums, then are constants, then are... So as you can see, this is not the way you do it. The way that you do this is with script templates. So let me show you what they are about. So script templates is something like this. I want to use a template, and let me just place here a new name so it doesn't conflict. And here I already have one, but I'm going to show you how you can build this. So whenever I select this template and then do a new script, you're going to see what I end up with. So you're going to see that I already have a structure that I constantly code that I'm going to use for my new code. So I already have all the things that I talked about set up here in a neat way so I can start using them. So let me show you how you can actually build this thing, which whenever you set up a new script here is going to pop up here on your project templates, and you're going to select one of the scripts you want. So if you go to the Godot docs, and you can find a section that it says about creating script templates, and there's a bunch of information here, but basically you can have editor defined templates by placing on these folders, and you can also have project defined templates, which is the one that I like to use. So to do this, you're simply going to create a folder on your project that is going to have one of the few things. So let me show you how it's done. So here on my project, I have a script template folder, and inside of it I have a type and the base script that I use. So if I open this up, this is the thing that you need to do. And another thing that I have to mention here is these extra settings here you're going to use. So these are things like the name that's going to be placed on your script templates, which in the case of my one is base custom script, which is what we see whenever we type here, and you're going to see base custom script. That is the meta name. And you can also have a description, which is the one that I type here, base script with structures. And this is what is going to be shown for you here. You can also set a meta default, which on the documentation So this method default true is going to be defined as the default template you're going to use for your project if you want. And we also can set the space idents. So next you're going to code your script the way you want it to appear once you start a new script. So I just placed some commentary here that's going to define the structure of my script and some built-in functions. So whenever I give up a new script, you're going to see that it's going to copy basically this part here on a new script. And that is how you use templates. So in this case, I'm going to use the templates to organize the structure of my code by building this commentary here. But you can also build code with basically anything you want and set up as a script template and save inside of this folder like this. And you can use it on your project just as you want. So you can have script templates for enemies, objects, anything basically that you want to store as a template. So very useful thing that you should be using to speed up your workflow and to keep your code clean. I just wish that this structure would be static, and if we change this, it would update our code with the follow structure for the templates, but that I think is too much asking. So for now, this is one of the ways you can use templates. The next thing I want to talk about is static typing. So I purposely avoid typing any static code here on the thing that was shown, because I wanted to talk about on this section. So static typing, very briefly, is when you define the type of your variables and what the functions return. So as you can see here on the documentation for Gdscript programming languages and static type in Gdscript, it gives you the whole detail of what it's all about. But the important thing that you should know about static typing on Gdscript is that it improves performance by optimizing your code whenever you run it, and it also helps you organize and give you more auto-completion, which is a lot better than having just dynamic code. So there are a lot of advantages for you to use static typing, and I think you should try to use it. So if I wanted to update this code here, the places where you want to do static typing, this would be a string. This is how you do static typing. You simply, on the definition of the variable, you specify what actually you want that variable to hold. This is going to, in turn, allow you to keep it as set up with that specific thing, and it's not going to allow you to change it later. So let me just see if I can show you. So we have here speed as set to 1.0, which is a float value. And let's say that whenever we get the speed, we want to change the speed to something absurd, like converting it back to a string. Because of the static typing that we pass here as a float value, we cannot change this up. So you see here that we cannot change the value of the float back to a string. So this is also one of the advantages of static typing. You define what the variable will be, and you are going to be able to change. And this helps to speed coding, to keep your code more organized, and to also autocomplete a little better. So there's a lot of advantages for you, and you should try to use it. So you can static type all your variables like this, and you can also static type your methods, which you do this and you specify what they return. So in the case of your functions not returning anything, this is how you do it. You simply type void. And in the case that you want to specify a returning type of variable, you just specify what it's going to return. In this case, it's going to return our object name, which is a string. So we are going to simply say that this function returns a string. And you can read a lot more details about this on the documentation page. It's going to give you the whole shebang of how you can use static typing. I recommend you to read it if you want to know more details. So pretty useful stuff that should help you to clean your code and to keep it faster as well. Something also very minor that is going to help you is if you wanted to place functions on a single line, you can do that. And you can also chain a lot of commands together on a single line by using the comma. So let's say we want to change our object name as well to be something like new name. And we also want to place return on the same line. You can do this by putting the comma and the dot together. And this is going to be read as a two-line. So it's going to be basically, the program is going to read something like this. And you can also do it with a one line by just separating it with this command here. So this is very useful if you have a short line of code that you want to keep on a single line. For structure and organization, you can do it like this. And you can also split them using this parentheses here. So let's just say here on our return speed, we want to do some math here. And we want to do speed equals speed divided by 2. And we want this to be split on a new line down here. What you can do is you can do it like this. And once you do it like this, you can basically split this expression whenever you want. So here on this case, the assignment need to be inside of the expression. So imagine you want to do it like this, then you can split your speed here and this like here. And why is this beneficial? Well, let's say you're setting up a vectors. So you're going to have a vector here, and let's just work with a vector 3, and this is going to be a vector 3, 0. And we want to set the vector up. So one of the ways you can do this is create a new vector, and you set up the values as you want here. And this could be very useful for organizing your vectors. For instance, you can do it like this. This is very much readable, and you can have a bunch of complex expressions here that is going to also still allow you to be more readable, because we know that this is x, this is y, and this is z. So as you can see, this is a lot more readable than if you did the same thing, but you try to keep it as a single line. You're going to see that it gets a little more harder for you to understand what is x, y, and z. So as you can see, this is the benefit of splitting your expressions on other lines as well. For vectors, this is very useful. You can apply this to other things as well. So this is another trick you can use. Another thing that I want to show you that you can do with these things that I did here, but I usually don't use it, but you can do, is by saying region. So if you do this with the code, it's going to notice that it's going to turn purple. And let's say we want to split this and we want to end the region. So I think it's region ends. Hold on a second. So here on the documentation under scripting, programming language, Gdscript reference, we can find a big file here that's going to show you how Gdscript is coded, and it's going to show all these little secrets. And one of those is the code regions. And you can basically define regions and fold them as you want, and add also some descriptions. This is what I meant to type, which is end region. If I go back here, it's actually region and region. So now as you can see, there's a little icon here that I can simply click to hide up my region. So this is very useful if you want to fold it up and have a big script that you want to fold with some type of organization. And you can also do regions after the structure you built. So let's say you want to do this, you can also define here as, let's say, a object A exports. So then you can have your exports category, and you can also have a bunch of regions that defines the exports of your objects. So something like this, and whenever you want, you just fold it up, and you know there are group folders inside of here. So this can and cannot be beneficial because you're basically hiding code from sites. And at first, this is useful, but I usually don't like to use it because it basically hides your code. But if you have a code that is very much complex, I think it is beneficial for you to group them together. But usually this is not a go with scripting. You usually want to keep things simple, and whenever you need, you can use these resources to organize your code a little better. So there we go. I'm going to leave one here just for reference, that these are how you code regions. Another thing that I want to talk about is naming conventions for your Godot project. So here on Wikipedia, the objective of having naming conventions on your code is to reduce the effort to read and understand the code, and to basically allow you to read it very much faster than previously. So there are of course some challenges for you to do this. So in Godot, the naming conventions that I usually use is for, I don't know if I exemplify this on my files, of course I did not, but for folders I usually keep them at lowercase with snake case. So this is usually you separate any spaces you have with underscores and you keep everything at the lowercase. The benefit of this is to not conflict with file systems that make difference on the folder file path names by lower and upper cases. Some systems have issued with that. So usually I use the lowercase with a space as underscores, and this is how I work. For object names, I usually do the opposite, and let me just see if I can find something here. So I usually kept them as uppercase and without any spaces. So usually when I have objects that I want to set up, I usually do it like this. So you can see that the path folder, if I can show this on my file system, I usually have them as lowercase when the file system, but as a object system, I usually keep them as with the main letters uppercase and without any spaces. So this is how I organize the naming conventions for my project. Oh yeah, the naming conventions for this code on your scripts is as follows. So usually with enumerations, I kept them all as uppercase. With constants as well, I kept them as uppercase. With variables export, I can usually do as I see fit, so usually lowercase. Here, I don't know why I tapped uppercase, I guess it was for the tutorial. Public vars, usually I do it like this, so most of the vars name I also use the underscore here. For private vars, this is also the same way, I just place a underscore at the beginning of it. For the already variables, this is how I do it. For built-in override methods, because they are private inside of the object, we usually do this. This is default on Godot. With public methods, I do it like this. And with private methods, I do it like this. So the only difference thing that I also do is whenever I set up to a node, I usually don't do it like this. I think I usually do it by using, I don't know if I have here, an object that I can show you. So I do it uppercase just like I set up with the other thing that I talked about. So with objects, I usually do it with as uppercase without any spaces. And you can do this however you see fit. Just make sure that the rules you set up are being followed by every single script on your project. This makes sure you can understand it later, and it also helps you to separate a lot of things. So my recommendation for naming conventions for a script is to pick one that you like, that makes sense for you, and to keep it out throughout the whole project. This also applies, of course, to the static typing, which I most likely will use because of the performance speed. So every single place on my script, I also is going to be typing static code. So I would recommend, if you don't like to have static code, that is just remove it entirely from code for the entire place. You usually don't get benefits by mixing some places and then mixing on other. So if you're lazy, just don't use static type, and if you want a better performance, just use static type whenever you want. So another thing that I want to talk about is the private and public things that you saw here, which I also have under the methods. So for my use case, private is whenever I want private things to be only accessible by this object or this script. So the way that we do this is by simply placing an underscore. Now this of course does not properly protect your stuff, that allows you to not set it up, because I can pretty much go in here and a public method and access a private variable and basically change it up without any fuss. So what you usually do is you place the underscore here to eliminate any access. So let's say that you want to access and you type it object, and you're going to see that object returned, because it uses an underscore, is separate from object name. So object name will be the public variable that's accessible by other objects, and this when underscore will be private to only the script. So the benefit of this is to try to encapsulate the code with public and private separation groups. So for instance, public, I want other objects to read and access it, and private, I do not want. So whenever I am typing about my object from another object, let's just say, you can see right here, we can access to all the public variables and constants and things, but the private ones are set up at the end of the auto-completion list here. And if I wanted to type an object, you're going to see this separation also here. So this is why you usually do it. So this allows you to keep in mind what things you want to be public available to other objects and what things you want to be private for other objects. Of course, this is not properly how other languages do it, but this is what you can do inside of Godot right now if you want this type of behavior. Of course, there's our PR for this that's been getting some traction lately. As you can see, there's a lot of reactions to this. And it's basically to add public and private access modifiers to Gdscript and to improve the auto-completion system, to basically hide anything that is private. So this is the main idea, and there's a lot of people participating, and I think this is going to be integrated into the engine language later. So as you can see, there's also very active. So that's the idea of using private and public, and it's very useful. And this is almost a given in other languages, but Godot Gdscript doesn't have it currently. So the way that I try to implement this is just by separating with an underscore. And we already do this because when the built-in methods override, you're going to see we use an underscore, because this is the function that is already set up when inside our objects we want to override it. So if you do this, this will not be called, and this will be considered a custom function, not a built-in overrided method. So as you can see, this is how you use private and public. So you can research this topic also on the internet if you want to know more, but this is the basic premise. Private is things we want to keep inside of this code, object or script or class, and public is things we want to be accessible by other objects, classes, and other scripts. So this is the way that I usually do it. And here is a more contextualized example of public and private things. So here on my player script, I have some variables here, like player is running and player inputs allowed. So I don't want other objects to be able to check or for this to appear on the auto-completion list automatically. So that's why I separate as a private. So I use them on the input section where I control the movement, and I want this to be stored as variables, but I don't want other objects to use it. So I place an underscore to try to avoid that. So whenever I access with other scripts or objects, I don't able to access very easily. I know that I have to type an underscore to access them. But otherwise, the export variables for the player entity and the camera rig node, I want them to be public, so I can not place an underscore here. So this is also another one where I have an already var set up to store my camera, and I don't use an underscore. You can also do this for methods and for variables, so it's pretty useful in my opinion. Now, talking about using this structure for a commentary for you to use as a structure template for your code, whenever you start to have functions and you want to place comments on them, you're going to see that it's going to have an issue here. So let's say runs when the object is ready. You're going to see that this is going to mess up with your code and the things you want. So one of the things that I learned is that you can place your comments inside of the functions. This is going to help you to copy and paste the functions to other places, because it's going to allow you to copy the commentary belongs to the function. Because if not, you usually have to copy the line above. And when you have a bunch of functions running at the same time, this can also get a little bit confusing. But that is how you do it. By placing comments inside of a function, it's a little easier for you to move this entire function to a new place. You can make sure that your commentary is copied as well. So you can place comments inside of it to not mess up the structure of these simple comments. Another thing you can also do is do a double comment to highlight it on a different way. So this is also very useful, and if you wanted, you could make this structure to be highlighted differently, so you would know what they are, and you can also place normal comments inside of there, So just it keeps them separate what is the structure and what is a normal comment. So that is also another way you can do it. But I don't need to highlight it. I just do it like this. I like to use highlights whenever I need it. Another thing you can do in your code is to place some special ones like these. And these keywords here is going to allow you to basically highlight your commentary codes with some colors. And I believe you can find these at, so it's something about the highlight. And I don't know if it's on here or on a project. So here it is. On comment markers, you can define some preset colors for 3 levels of commentary markers, and you can place the words you use. So I don't think error was in here. I can simply type in here and add error to my key list. And I can basically set my critical color to whenever I want, something like super red. And whenever I type in here error, just the editor updates, it's going to highlight with the color that I just gave. So this is also another way you can customize your code to be a little more readable. And this is very useful because it allows you to highlight parts of your comments, and it's going to allow you to later do things like these. So yeah, tools for you to organize your comment system. Very useful. Another thing that I want to talk about, and I think I used in some of my code here, is that you can type variables outside and inside functions. So what is the main difference? What is the difference on setting the variable like this, then setting it up on your definition right there and just simply accessing it later? So the difference between these two, and this is going to throw an error because this is a static function, but I'm going to explain to you what this means in a second. So when you define variables outside of your functions, they are stored within the script or the object you're using. Whenever you place variables inside of the functions, they are temporary variables only used whenever you use that method. So this means that they are using fewer resources because they are not stored in memory whenever the function is not running. Whereas if you define variables outside of there, like a normal variable, so let me just get the example here. Whenever you define these variables here, they are stored always and saved within the object because we plan to use them for future things. But whenever you set up variables inside a function, whenever that function is finished, every single variable you define inside of here is going to be deleted. And that is the main advantage. For things like calculations with functions, we usually want to use a temporary variable to be stored so we can assign it later. In this case, you can see that I use some dictionary things to store from the temporary variable. So you can also use temporary constants. I don't know if you knew this, but you can also use a constant inside of here that's going to allow you to basically use this constant inside of the function. So it's basically the same thing as define a constant outside of your object, but the difference is that this is stored always in your object and this is only used whenever you set up the function. And this is beneficial because you sometimes want to grab reference for other things and you want to use them on your code, but you do not want to touch specific parts of this. So this is also very useful. You can use constants as temporary variables inside of your function here as well. And also this is a little more advanced, but you can also use static things. So we have static vars, and you can also have a static functions. So what static actually means? So static on the case of functions is you want to have a function that is going to do something, like in this case is not going to do anything, it's going to be a void function. Type static to optimize your function as well. This means that whenever you place static here, that every single thing information here is not going to be accessible within the object. It's going to be accessible to only arguments you provide within this function. So let's say that you want to have a function here that's going to be accessing like in this case, we want to return an object name but we are accessing the object name outside of this function argument. So if you try to define this as static, you're going to see it's going to throw an error because it's accessing non-static variables such as object name. But if we pass the object name here as a string value, this is going to fix the function and is only going to increase our warnings because we are using the same name as a variable we define here. So that is the case for static functions. Now for static variables, whenever we define a static variable, like let's just say the object name is a static variable, whenever we change this variable, it's going to be changed for every single object that uses this var. So let's say that we have a player function here in the case of human main here. So I have a bunch of things related to a human 3D model that I'm working on it. So whenever I duplicate this 3D model with this script to, let's say, an NPC, also one for the player, and I have basically a static one here, that is going to be my object name, and I'm going to define this as my name. So this static variable here is an object name for this object. Whenever I change this variable here, it's going to change this value for every single object that uses this variable. So this is almost like a mixture between constant and variables. You're going to have basically a variable that's being shared by all the other instances of this code. So this is useful sometimes when you want things to be shared by all your objects, like resource links or some other type of data structure that you want to share between all objects that uses the same thing. So if I was to use this with a bunch of instances and I change the object name, for every single object that uses this variable is going to also be updated. So this can be very useful if you want it for your code. As you can see, these are little secrets that can turn your code from this to something like this, and they can also improve performance and keep your code a lot more cleaner. And you also learned how to use the script templates, which basically allows you to generate scripts very quickly with a defined template, just by saving them under a script templates folder and by placing the script you want and configuring as you see fit. So there we go. I hope this was useful to you in some way. My name is Philip, and I'm going to be leaving this video here. And as you can see, these are very useful tips and secrets. Sorry that they were not presented in a concise order. It was just a mess to present this one, but I don't think I have a very specific order to present these. So hopefully you found this information useful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.